Product management, one of the most sought after roles in the tech industry. And today we have someone who's going to break it all down for you, what skills you need, what certifications, what qualifications, and maybe even some of those innate abilities that make people great product managers. I'm really excited for today's guest, who's a product leader who will be talking to us about all the amazing things she does in the tech industry. Welcome to the podcast, Sandra.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great. So, we always have, or at least in the 84 previous episodes before today, we've had a diverse and a broad spectrum of guests, with different backgrounds. In your profile, for example, you says that you grew up in Colombia, moved here, all of that.
Yeah.
What inspired your journey into tech?
It was just life. I came to the US. Growing up, most of my family in Colombia were lawyers, and I always thought I was going to be a lawyer. So I started my career, my university in Colombia as a lawyer. And when I moved to the US, I realized that law was a master's degree. And, I was like, well, I don't know if I have the resources or the time to become a lawyer in the US. So I was working nearby Villanova University, which in that time I didn't even know what Villanova was. And they had a program for working adults. So they only had like 5 careers, and information systems with mostly engineering background was part of it. And I just selected because it was close to me, because it was a good school, and because I thought, well, I can be an engineer. So that's how I ended up going for undergrad for information systems and eventually becoming an engineer. And one thing led to the next. And eventually I became a product manager, a technical product manager.
So, did you have any background in engineering before this?
Well, I didn't have a background in engineering in like high school or interested in engineering because I thought I was going to be a lawyer, but I did go to school for information systems, and the Villanova program is heavy on engineering concepts, algorithms, programming languages. So if you were to go to that school, you could be an engineer. You could become a software developer. So right out of college, I became a software developer.
Wow. So for a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I mean mostly me, there's usually a lot of uh apprehension when it comes to getting your hands dirty when it comes to actual technical stuff. One of the lies I tell myself is that if I wanted to be an engineer, I could, but
You probably
never
could.
never put it to the test.
Well,
How do you get over that? Not maybe it's not even fair, but just that lack of action towards doing it.
it is a fear. Engineering, unlike, I don't know, business and other careers, is not in our face all the time. In other words, it's not intuitive, right? The languages, the way of thinking is not something that we grew up with. When you think about art or music or social um, um, careers, it's very in the air everywhere. Engineering, especially software engineering, is not like that. You really have to think mathematically. You have to uh, software engineering and software development is like learning a language. So what I normally tell people, because the fear is mostly to the science part of it or the math part of it, but in my opinion, software development and engineering is not like a hard math, right? Like no chemistry or physics or calculus. It's very simple math, but it's a way of thinking. And to me, as a person that speaks a second language, it's really about learning a different language, right? It's learning computer languages. So I always tell people, if you like languages, or if you speak 2 or 3 or more languages, then you probably can be an engineer, because it's a lot more about learning a new language than it is about math or science.
Okay, so I like that second language reference, but and you also identify that people who are bilingual or multilingual can potentially be potential candidates to be great software engineers.
Correct.
But the flip side of that is that there are some fundamental principles that you kind of like see in that ability to learn.
Yeah.
For someone who's not bilingual, what are some of those that they can at least maybe think about as a framework to help them also have that same level of success?
Well, I always tell people, well, engineering, all of engineers are not as easy to come. Again, because it's not around us. It's not like arts or social science. You take a little bit more time because it's a little bit more foreign, but it's still, we are all capable of doing things that are a little bit difficult, and engineering is not a different, it's not different in that sense. Now, if you think about it, there are tons of software engineers that are self-taught, that go to a 3-month boot camp, and they come out with enough fundamentals that then can start their career in engineering. So to me, if there is a lot of software engineers that start with just a 3-month 6-month class, that means that is something that is attainable. I'm not going to say that it's easy, but it definitely is attainable.
And so you've made that transition from, being extremely technical as a software engineer to being just a little less technical with product management.
Yeah.
What does the difference look like in both worlds?
So it's, product manager can be really a lot less technical, because you don't necessarily need to know how the sausage is made. And so not everybody has to have a background. I do encourage people that want to come into product management or technical program or project manager to learn a little bit about it, right? Um, even take a class on programming, a class on algorithms, just to understand a little bit the lingo and the concept, but it is a lot less technical. You're not going to sit there and have to understand how a button is clicked or how something is done in the back end, but you do need to understand some of the fundamentals, about back end and front end, and like kind of like the technical stack. But you don't definitely don't need to be technical. And the way I transition, for me, because I became an engineer as an adult, I already have businesses, my own businesses, and product manager is the business side of software engineer. We understand the client. So if you have been in customer service, if you are a customer focused person, if you can relate or ask questions to the customers, and if you can't or are able to then turn around and explain in simple terms or in technical terms in my case, then you can become a product manager. You don't necessarily have to have a background in engineering. Now, I am a more technical product manager because I work with platforms and more technical products, but majority of product managers are business product managers, and they know business concept, marketing, sales, how to understand clients, psychology will be a good background. Anything that help you understand the customer will make you a good product manager, not necessarily a technical product manager, but a good product manager.
Mm. And you've kind of like touched a little bit on what my next question was going to be in terms of, like I said at the top, product is one of the most sought after roles. And you've kind of like talked about what also are the skills that makes someone a great product manager. But for someone who's maybe looking to go into the role, what can they expect to be doing, and why is that foundation of understanding the customer such an important skill set to have?
Yeah, I will say understanding products in general, and that goes into a little bit of finance, return on investment, some of the basic finance concepts are a good skill to have. So understanding what makes money, what doesn't make money, understanding demographics, understanding customer base, segmentation. Those are more on the business side of the product management. Those are good to have. I find that product managers that understand that part of the business normally are good product managers. Then you have to be open and willing to collaborate with everybody. So I think one of the misunderstanding about product managers is that people think that we come up with the ideas of how the product is going to be. We call, we're called the CEO of the product, but really it's more about searching for people's idea. So collaborating with the technical team, collaborating with the marketing team, collaborating with the sales team, being able to go and ask people, listen to people, dig deeper, really get to the what is the problem and is this problem worth solving, are things that are very important as a product manager. I think one of the greatest uh, I think sorrows of my life, because as a product manager you get a lot of startups and a lot of people that has a lot of ideas, and they put a lot of resources in products that aren't good products because they're not problems that people is looking to solve. So I always get people to pitch in and say, oh, I'm doing this app and I put 6 engineers and I put in my own time, and they go and tell you very excited about how they are building this amazing product, and then you sit there and you're like, but is this really a problem? Are people really looking to solve the problem? And now, if it's a problem, are people willing to pay for this problem? Because it doesn't only have to be a problem that you need to solve, it has to be bad enough, or people need to feel the pain enough that they will pay to solve that problem. And those are the things that a product manager needs to be really aware of in order to create good products.
Yeah, you're really getting me excited with this last thing that you spoke about, because I think it's kind of like the bread and butter of what product is, but most don't want to lose the audience. If it makes sense. So we'll try to keep that balance, but I really want to dive deeper into it, because um, I do have a video breakdown on my channel that talks about project, program, and product managers. And
Hmm.
those are all similar in terms of like some of the basic functions, whether it's like, keeping timelines, making sure things run smoothly, running the program, etc. But product management is unique in the one thing that you said, is that if I'm a project manager and a program manager to a large extent, just that I have a bigger scope,
Yeah.
if we say this is going to get done by now, and we put the timeline, we track it, we put it in whatever project management tool that we put it in, and it gets
Yeah.
done, we're successful. Products
Right.
don't work that way.
Correct. Yeah.
You need adoption, you need buying, it needs
Yes.
to work. That's why the product managers at the big tech companies have things like daily active users, monthly active users,
Correct.
click throughs, all of these metrics that help you figure out what is we made a vision, we said this is what it's going to do, but on the back end of it, is it doing that?
Yes.
There has to be some skills that, if we forget about the training, we forget about the skills. Is there a type of person that can be successful as a product manager?
Yeah. I think a person that is able to collaborate. It is the most important, I find, skill. You have to be able to put your title aside and ask everybody their opinion and listen to everybody. Because normally, well, there are two types. One is we are being paid to build a product, right? And that is a little difficult because then you have a client that is going to come and tell you, this is what I need, right? This is what I need you to build for me. And you are in charge to really understand what the problem is, and listening to them, but also steering in the right direction. Because a lot of people have an idea of how they're going to solve the problem, and they're going to tell you a lot of things that don't really mean what they actually are saying. So you have to be able to collaborate with them. You have to be able to listen to them. So you have to be a good listener. You have to be a good collaborator, and you have to have curiosity, right? Find out how other people solve the problem, find out what the industry is doing, find out where in the world there is a similar product that works and doesn't work, trying to figure out lesson learned before there are even lessons to learn. So there is a lot of uh, like I say, collaboration and listening and curiosity that you have to have in order to be a good product manager.
So curiosity, collaborative. I do hear a bit of humility as well, right?
For
Like
sure.
you can be a know-it-all.
Yes.
Um, And what are some of the big challenges that you've seen, product managers run into in your, time as a product leader?
Well, there is a tension between product and tech, right? A lot of tech leads feel like product managers are there just for the business, right? And they will feel like you don't understand tech, that you don't understand how things are supposed to be doing, or and so being able to earn the respect with the tech team, I find is one of the most difficult things as a product manager. You have to be able, because you're not the boss of the engineers, right? And you don't have, normally, at least in organizations like mine, you're normally not the administrative manager of the teams. You are simply the boss of the product itself. So tech has a lot of ability to do a lot of things, and kind of manage the capacity and the build out in a way that you cannot control. So to me, building trust with the tech team is one of the most difficult parts. But the beautiful thing about it is that once you're successful, is the most beautiful thing, right? Like once you have your tech team, once you are actually in our company is a quad, and you work together with the data scientists, with the UX designers, with the tech leads, and with the product, and you really think about them as your partners, and they think about you as your partner, it becomes a lot easier. But until then, it is a work, and it is a struggle to get there.
So if we look at roles or daily jobs outside of product, what are like maybe top three jobs that someone will have? Maybe it could be blue collar work, could be white collar work that you see that say, you see these three jobs, they'll be good product managers for sure.
Well, I think like physical project managers are good at product, because they really think software sometimes is very abstract, especially when you're starting from scratch. If you're in a small company and it's a new idea, you cannot really touch it, right? People that have worked in the construction industry, that actually know what it takes. I always tell people building software and building a house is very similar. And the good thing about being in construction is that it grounds you in the time, right? It takes you this long to build a wall. There is nothing magical about it. And I think when you have that construct of time, and touch things and know how long it takes to get the materials, put them somewhere, think about the weather, think about do you get the products that you needed to build something, that allows you to have a more realistic view on project and products that are software related. One of the issues that the industry always have is that we don't never finish on time. I think the statistics are like 60% of the projects don't make it on time, and it's because of that abstract aspect of it. So if you have work in projects that are more physical, that grounds you a little bit on how things that are tangible work, and it help you understand timelines and projects a little bit better.
There was an analogy that comes to mind as you were saying that. Let's say, for example, a cornfield, right? Let's say it takes 3 months to grow a cornfield, right? Making three cornfields will not give you ready corn in 1 month, right?
Correct.
So it takes the amount of time that it takes, and
Yes.
that's before, because a lot of the times to even set that timeline, you have to make a lot of assumptions, right?
Yes.
Let's say, for example, we would have purchased the platform and the platform will be ready to integrate. We would have done X, Y, Z. Like you're making a lot of assumptions of things that are supposed to be perfect. And
Correct.
as we all know, nothing ever works the
And
way it's
yeah.
supposed to. So that delay always comes in,
Yeah.
just to kind of like bring it closer to home.
And
But
anything that allows you to understand dependencies, that I think is the pitfall of products. Not being able to understand who you depend on or what you depend on can really backfire when it comes to software development, because sometimes you just like, oh, I need testing, and there is one testing team for three projects, and this one is a higher priority than the other. Now, the other thing that is very important for product management is an ability to prioritize. We don't have infinite resources, we don't have infinite time. So being able to say, hey, okay, these are going to be the features that I'm going to release in this upcoming release because X and Y, and having the ability to explain the business value and why you're gonna go for this and that, and why you're gonna cut X or Y, that is very important.
And to add on to that, right, is that ability to prioritize. You talked about entrepreneurship, and it's interesting because I also have that background, so I can relate. Is nothing prepares you for product kind of like entrepreneurship, because even something like prioritization. So if I go back to like Nike's origin story, where they had a vision for a shoe, but they didn't have a way to make the shoe. So they were using waffle makers to kind of like make
Absolutely.
the shoe foams and all of that. And that's prioritization in a sense, because you know that you have to kind of like get this design right for every other thing to work.
Yeah.
I mean, you could maybe go talk to a factory, do all of that work, or you see what I'm saying? But, or you could do this one thing, because eventually Nike now has to have a global headquarters. They have to sign their athletes. But if you go sign the athlete before you make the sole,
Right,
you
right,
don't get
right.
Nike.
If there is not a product, correct. And
So,
dependency, that also touches on dependency. They were
yep.
dependent on having the equipment that they needed to
Yeah.
actually build a shoe.
And because they don't have that, because they had that dependency, they had to figure out a workaround, right? Of,
Correct.
okay, let's use the waffle maker, because they're not making shoes with waffle makers today, right? But
Right.
they had to do that because they understand that the dependency of having to go to a factory was too high. So how
Correct.
do we figure out a solution that works today, right? And
Yeah.
that's where improvisation comes in,
Right.
prioritization,
And
road
agility.
mapping, right? Eventually we'll get to this point where we can do this, but at this point in the journey, this is what we need to do.
Right, right.
So
Let's get the first product out and then we see.
yep. And that's another thing that I almost want you to speak to, because in the product manager's world, the goal, almost like if we use that analogy of being a product CEO, your life almost becomes creating a future that people want to see, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes you have to understand that that future is so far away that you can make a future happen today, but not the future.
Right, right, right.
How how important is it for new product managers or people who want to transition into this role to understand what that looks like? And do you have some examples that you can give to help people better understand that concept?
Well, we have this concept of minimal viable product, which is the idea that if you have a product that you're going to release, you are going to put out the smallest piece of working software so you have people testing it and giving you feedback. One of the things that is very important in software engineering is the ability to get feedback and change the course of your product based on that feedback. And sometimes, like you said, because the product is not there, because if we are talking something very innovative like the first iPhone, people didn't have an idea what it was to have a touch screen, right? So you can't really ask people for feedback if they cannot even imagine something that they have never seen before. So it is very important that you put out your product, the smallest working prototype out there, and then have people tell you, do they like it, do they not like it? Also understanding your customer or your like who's the target audience is important, because if you are putting a product out there and you say, well, I'm gonna have a product that is for, let's say, older people that are not that techy, and then you make it very sophisticated and it has a lot of lights and a lot of sound, and then it's not that the problem is not there for the customer, but it's so complicated that they're not going to be able to use it. So those are the things that you have to balance when you're first becoming a product manager. You got to understand audience, you got to understand how to um, lean down your product, really really make the smallest possible working product. One of the things that I see often is that we work in features but kind of like in isolation. I like the product mentality that help you think through your product end to end, all of the component, the software, the hardware, the if you are a good product manager, you have to think about the non-functional requirements. How many customers are you going to have? If you were to have, I think about Zoom. when the pandemic happened, if you went to have like a catastrophe and now everybody is online, is your network going to be able to handle 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the amount of people? And in other hand, are you spending too much money thinking that you're going to have 1 million users when there is no way for you to reach them and you're only going to have 10? So there is a lot of things that you have to balance and think through. um, I think it's slowing down and really thinking, having time. It's really hard when you're doing software because you're in meetings, because you're talking to people, because you're, but having some time to really think about your product, all of the aspects of it, the technical, the not technical, that helps you because you really have to anticipate some of the things, and it's hard. So it's kind of like a philosophical way, right? Like if you think about Socrates and when they were sitting out there thinking about life, you have to think about your product in a philosophical way, in an abstract way, but you also have to think about all of the really real performance and technical aspects of it.
So it kind of like sounds like a lot of the times you are not the user of the product, right? You don't live in that world
Right,
100% of the time.
right,
You're building something for someone to use and all
right,
kinds of people to use, right?
right.
But your success and failure is kind of like tied to how deeply you understand those different people who use the product.
Absolutely.
How does one build that deep level of insight to be successful as a product manager?
The most important thing is talking to the people. If you're a product manager and you're not engaging your user until you're in testing, that's not good, right? Before you put anything in paper, before you go to the UX team, before you create a, you know, design or an ideation, anything, you have to talk to the people. You have to ask people that have used it, or that are using something similar, and then, you know, really interview them, really, some of the sessions that we have with users are like 2 hours, 3 hours. You have to be talking with them all the time and make the time for it. And you have to interpret their answers, because sometimes what they're telling you doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be like, oh, I want a blue skin, a blue screen. Do you really? What type of blue? Why is it that you want a blue? Is it because blue is your favorite color? Is it because it's better under some lighting? So there is a lot of user interaction that you have to have with the customer, and then you have to show them every step of the way. That's the reason why we have to be very adamant that every sprint you have a working prototype that you can show. Tell me what you think about this, because if you sit there and code for 6 months and then only until the end you are putting skins on it, and then, the UX is coming, it might not work, right? You might find out that it's taking too long and the user is tired, because just when I remember evaluating a product, and it was a login screen, and the people will fail the login like 3 times out of 5. Like, you cannot use the product if, and I know we have to deal with authentication issues and security issues, but if it takes me 3 attempts to open your app, I might just not, it can be the best app in the world. And product managers don't think about that, because you're thinking about your product itself, right? Like, what is it solving? But I'm gonna give you this amazing thing that is going to make your life easier, but you cannot even log in. So all of that have to be part of it, and you only learn of those issues when you have the customer with you, trying it every step of the way.
What you're just talking about almost brings another topic to mind in terms of especially maybe a bit of design part of product management, but almost being able to anticipate what people need. How important is that?
Well, I mean, it depends of what type of products, right? If you work for a big company, they cannot know, the users are very vocal, and they're telling them like, in my case, I work for a bank, and we know that customers need a better checking account or a better way of checking their statements, or we kind of know because they're very vocal and they tell us, and we also know because the industry is there driving some of the innovation. But if you are a new a startup and you're thinking about a new idea, then that's when you have to start anticipating. And again, not only anticipating what will be good for your user, but what they will be willing to pay for. And that you only get by asking the question. If I sit in front of you, I have an example of a it's a product, technical product for Afro hair, right? And it teaches you something about how to get your hair done or whatever. And it's a beautiful idea. As Afro Latina with curly hair, I always think about, oh, it would be really nice if I could sit in the mirror and have tutorials. But would I pay for it? Would I pay a subscription of $10 a month just to do my hair? I personally wouldn't, right? So you have to go to the people that you're intended to serve, and be like, hey, if I give you this product, they're gonna be really excited about it because yes, it solves a problem, but how much are you willing to pay for it? And then you gotta be like, okay, would you be an early adopter? And would you pay a fee for it? If they say no, that is an indication of how much your user will be able or willing to pay for the product that you're building.
This example that you gave brings another example to my mind. So there was a founder that I know, a tech founder, who was building this great app, right? That basically helps you put all your assets together, right? So you have a checking account here, you have an investment account, you have you don't even have to log it in. I imagine that that's something they could have brought in later down the pipeline, but it's almost like a legacy account, right? And it had all the features where, they will check in with you if you didn't get back within a certain time frame. Um they could contact your next of kin, etc. Great app. I think the challenge with it was exactly what you're describing. It was great, but not great enough for people to pay for.
Right, right,
And another good example is like when you think about things like Credit Karma or Experian and all these other apps that help you check your credit. It's a very valuable service. People probably log into those things multiple times a week, but nobody's paying for it.
right. So how do you monetize your product?
But they have a business model that helps them, whether it's like selling your data, whatever
Yeah,
else it
yeah,
is, they can
yeah.
make money off of it. But
Right.
if someone solely came out tomorrow and said, I'm going to show you your credit, and that's the thing, it's like it's very arbitrary. Sometimes as human beings we decide this is something we're going to pay for, other times we
Right.
decide this is not something we're going to pay for. And sometimes the same thing that's free on the consumer side might be paid on the enterprise side. So it's even like who pays for it or
Yeah,
who pays for a version, because Gmail is free for everybody to open as many accounts, but if you're opening enterprise Gmail, then you have to pay. But you
correct.
have the same services. You have Drive. Maybe they have more storage. That's it. But you have basically the same service.
I remember when I have an MBA, and when I was in business school, we had an innovation class, and we have this guy that was a serial innovator, entrepreneur, a lot of money, and he created a product for identity theft before it was like a big issue. And he was able to sell the product to a major insurance company because they were like, yeah, we're hearing that people is worried about this, and they gave him a budget like $1 million, and he was able to develop everything, and they couldn't solve one insurance in like a year because people saw it as a problem, but not enough of a problem that they will pay for it. And I don't think even today, when we have a lot more breaches, people still not willing to pay for, identity protection and all of these things. Like, unless you have a lot of money in the bank, you're like, well. And even if you have a lot of money, normally the bank will say, oh, I reimburse you if you have tests. So there is not a real need for you to pay for protection. And those are the type of things that you have to find out as a product manager before you start building, because building software is expensive, time consuming, and is difficult. So you got to make sure before you start. And I always say it for my entrepreneurs out there, that, in especially for a lot of developers, I find that a lot of the startups are developers or engineers in background, but they have zero idea about product management. They don't ever go and ask questions. They don't ever have hypotheses. They don't ever have prototypes. They're just coders, right? And they go and build things and put it in front of people, and they spend, half the salary and three times the amount of time that they're doing their job. So much resources go into startups nowadays, but because they don't know about product manager and they don't really understand what it means to put a product out there and sell it, then they fail, and it's very
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Yeah, I think you bring up like really, 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 really great points about just the core reasons why people fail when it comes to product management or even just launching new products in general. Um, I had I have this question, but then I'll go back to it. Uh, it's so one of the things trends I've been seeing in the last 3 to 5 years is that a lot of teams that were just engineering only. Why? Because of course, as businesses started to go online and more businesses went online and stuff like that, they just needed a database to keep all the records. They built a website. They did all those things without really having product teams. But now there's a lot of tech debt. Tools are not working as they should, and now many of those organizations are now bringing in product teams
Yeah,
to
and
where
it's really
like
hard. It's really hard for product. I don't think I ever been in a team where product manager was hired first. Like it's
yeah.
always like 3 years down the road, and you sit there and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to take this already created product that has this many million customers and turn it around? It's a real thing.
And it's usually when the confusion starts, right? Like when it's not working as it should, when the experience isn't great, and we want to
Yeah.
think about how are we decoupling, how are we even deciding, that we want to build this or that,
Yeah.
etc.
And then
Uh,
people want
so Olua
somebody's.
Shitemi says, great conversation. Thanks for joining, and thanks for sharing that. Sorry, you were gonna say something, Sandra.
No, I was gonna say, and then when people that aren't technical start saying, but this should do this, and we should be able to do X and Y, and this other product does it, and you're like, yeah, but you have a legacy product, and you have this much tech debt, and we don't have the capacity, or we don't. It is a lot of things that happen, and because I guess a lot of people have apps in their phones. They have an idea of how things should work. And well, that's not what you built. And you never took the time to actually consider what it would mean to change your app for the better or for the future.
To your point, there's almost like a sticking issue that I realize that large enterprises have for startups can just move very quickly on unstructured data, right? Because a lot of the times, the way like legacy system and infrastructure is built, and the different data layers and like disparate platforms, it's a lot harder to bring in process and action unstructured data. Whereas like for startups, so I was at a product meetup last week, and talking to some product leaders, and someone was telling me how they were essentially um, using, they used to work for a dating platform, and how aggressively they were using unstructured data to really try to figure out, like, so they were scanning images to try to figure out what types of things people
Hmm.
like that level of insight and analysis. I'm like, there's so many huge companies that if they tried that, they would literally pull their hamstring, right? Because they're just not set up to be able to
Yeah.
process data that quickly at that scale, etc. Because if you think about it, for a lot of legacy institutions, let's say banks, for example, these are industries that were built on ledgers and structured data. So even semi-structured data can provide like very huge barrier, not to speak of, things like audio, video,
Yeah.
images, all of those things.
Yeah. I think the biggest development right now is data, right? Like data analysis. We used to be tech, product, and design. Now we're tech, product, and data. Data is a major issue because we create so much of it, and data itself creates so much noise. So yes, you can have a great analytic tool, but then if your data is garbage, then you're gonna get garbage. And if that it is very noisy and you're making correlations that are not really there, it's data is I, as a product manager, as a technical person, the one thing I don't touch, data. Just take care of it. Take care of it, and then tell me what I cannot put out there, what I need to obscure, and you handle it, because it's a really difficult problem.
Yeah, yeah. And even like a lot of the then regulation around it, because I know
Oh,
like that's another thing that then holds it back because it's like,
yeah,
in the way that, for example, a dating app is unregulated, like they can do literally anything.
a lot of things.
Financial institutions don't have that power.
Yeah.
So you have to care a lot about, how are you storing the data? How are you obscuring the data? How are you protecting the data?
just
There's
passing it
just,
Yeah, just passing data from one software to another internally has a lot of regulations. We go
yeah.
through massive amount of governance and reviews and auditing, because we do have to be very careful. Now, I do, and this is my consumer side, not my product manager side. I do think that people is a little too scared of things. The one thing about data is that it expires really easily. In other words, yes, my age today is, what it is, but next year is not going to be. And then my
Mm,
address this year is this, but I just need to move, right? Like the moment that you make a big change in your life, all that data that they scrap, that they analyze, and that they like, even just predicting moods or likes or dislikes. People are so changing that I can love chocolate today and hate it tomorrow. And you are going to be there sending me ads about the best, greatest chocolate in the world because I ate chocolate last year and now I decide that I'm a vegan or a vegetarian, and that's it. So data changes, like data about people changes so fast that that makes it more difficult. But for us consumers, it's like, well, yeah, they can harvest information about you today, but you can easily change it tomorrow.
So if someone was starting out today and they came to you and said, I want to become a product manager like you, I want to become a senior vice president like you, I want to become successful in the future, but I didn't even go to college, so I don't have a lot of the privileges that you do have. What are the top three things I could do to be successful to take my first step?
I, most, I don't think, I think most product managers that I know don't have a same background. So I have peers that were software engineers. I have peers that were agility leads or scrum masters. I have peers that came from project manager and program manager. So um, I don't think I don't think there is like a formula to be successful or to enter successfully into the industry. But if I could tell somebody, first you have to know which product you're looking for. Like you have to be very specific about which company are you going to and which product are you going to try to be a product manager for, and then learn about that, because each product is different. Like in my case, I'm a technical product manager for an API gateway, which is a platform which is not consumer facing. There is a lot of difference from what I do that any other product managers that are actually building product for consumers do. So learning about that product, learning about the user, learning, and if you have any experience in that industry, if you are entering into an industry, let's say when I became an engineer, I was an engineer for a legal software because, as I said, my background before was in law. So I applied for a company that had legal software because I had legal knowledge writing. So that is how you bridge into the industry. If you have been employed in, T-Mobile, you can go into the T-Mobile technical side because you already know the consumer side of it. If you have been an insurance agent, then you can enter into all companies nowadays. Most companies are technical companies with a service. So any industry that you work in, right, even whether you have a degree or not, that is your entrance into the tech world. Working through making the case that because you know the consumer side or because you know the customer, you are able to become then the technical product manager because now you know what the consumers in the ground are feeling and thinking.
And that is so true because like, I see so many roles where they'll say, nursing experience or something like that, even though you're not going there to be a nurse. But the goal is if you've been in the industry, if you've worked the role before, you probably know more than most other people what it takes to succeed in that role. And you can bring that insight and help drive the outcomes that they're looking for.
Right. One that it was surprising to me, for AI, there is a lot of linguists that are being hired to train models because they know about part of speech, because they know how to break down sentences, and you don't think about those correlations. So you kind of have to think outside of the box when it comes to your career, what you've done, and kind of like understand what transferable skills you have and apply for positions that you can apply those transferable skills. It wouldn't have been as easy for me to go from, you know, my back. I was a writer, a Spanish text writer, to go to, I don't know, insurance. But because I had a background in law, I was able to become a developer in a legal system. So think about what it is that you've done. You're like, and it doesn't matter what it is. If you have worked in the service industry, if you work in a McDonald's, if what it is that you know about that customer that can help you get into the industry and tech industry through that service.
And I think that leans on even like the next step because I feel like product is also one of those tricky roles where, and again, there's no shade to any role or whatever, but just my gut feel is that if you really learn the fundamentals of what it takes to be a project manager or a program manager or a scrum master, you can literally go and do those roles day one. Product is one of those very different ones where you almost have to know it in some way, right? And that's
Right.
why you see so many companies have APMs. Because if you've not really done something similar to the product, made those trade-offs, had those conversations, even know what those decision-making points are. Because if you're a project manager, you're not doing it. Your
No,
people are telling you what to do.
right, right,
But a
right.
product manager, you have to look at all the evidence, look at all the data, and say, this is what we're doing.
Right. You
And
have
you
to make the
live
decision.
and die by those decisions.
Yes.
And even if you're qualified to make that decision, it's different when you've made that decision before versus when you haven't,
Right.
right? Because you'll always second guess yourself, right? For example, like if you've run a business before, let's say you had really high hopes, you invested a lot, the business crashed and went down. Maybe you were sad for like a whole year and didn't even want to talk to anybody, but you realize that at the end of it, you didn't die, right? So you know that regardless of whatever happens at this company, nothing is going to happen to me. So I'm going to be fine. And that gives you a bit more level of confidence in making those decisions.
Right.
Also, even being able to see, because a lot of the times we as human beings we tend to do a lot more review when things go wrong, and that builds experience in us regardless of
Correct.
whether that it is, that might be in friendships, relationships, whatever you choose to call it. We get stronger and wiser over time, which is you almost need that even in your first product role.
Right.
So that's why, for example, building projects might be a good way to do it. And sometimes it's not even necessarily like something elaborate. You might even be able to build a project, not necessarily with like an engineering team or whatever, but just go into the process of having a thought process or an hypothesis, as you've called it, right? To say, you know what, maybe I could get 100 people to sign up to this service to use it. Okay,
Right.
that was what I'm starting with. Then I
Yeah.
put out a Google form and said, hey, would you like to, you know, buy half a pizza, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
most people are never able to finish a pizza. And this
Right.
is how we do it. And going through those problems, you realize, sharing pizzas are messy. People don't know who's touched it. How do we get the
Right.
pizzas
Right.
to other people? Then you start to realize, because you start with a very simple idea, but all the problems you have to solve along the way get you to those really good answers that then make you realize, you know what? Selling half a pizza, it doesn't make sense. That's why nobody does it, right? Unless
Exactly.
you're in New York where you go buy slices off the street. But slices sell, full pizzas sell, but we
Yeah.
can't sell half pizzas, right?
Right. I will start with 10 people. I'll start with two people. Right? Can you convince two people not just to try your product, but to pay for it. Because that's the harder part. A lot of people will try things, but would they pay for it? Would they stay? So, like you say, put a Google form, make it easier. Put a Instagram or an X or whatever social platform you have. They all have surveys out there. Would you like this? Do you like this screen better than that screen? I have an idea. Is this similar to what influencers do? Should I wear this dress versus that is product manager at its best, asking what the people like, right? And then they will comment to everything. One of the things that there was like a meme, if you want to have like the answer for a test, or like if you have something that you have to do for school and then you post the wrong answer online, people will give you the right answer more than if you ask the right answer. So having ways to gather feedback, because let me tell you, gathering feedback is very difficult. Asking people to fill out a survey, do you like, if they like the product, they don't comment. If they don't like it, they will tell you. So having ways to ask for people's opinions and feedback, even as going your way and saying something wrong, so that they feel the need to tell you, that's what you need. Go ahead and ask people. And then, like you say, being humble and listening to it as a entrepreneur, or a startup, or a, how do you call it, a founder. People are so in love with their products that they're not able to hear when the product is not good. And this happened with my engineers too, like all the time. We talk about a solution, and I'm like, the users are not liking it. They're saying it's too slow. And one of my tech leads was like, well, they just don't know how to use it. And I'm like, well, is your product that good if your users don't? They just need to learn how to use it. Well, you didn't make it easy to learn, because if it was easy to learn, they would have learned it already. So all of those hard conversations, especially for the people that is their own product, you have to be willing to say, hey, I hear you. You don't want to pay for this. This sucks. Let me go a separate way. Let me go a different way. Because if not, you're just going to be there and spend all of your times and your resources for something that is just not going to be successful.
It reminds me of that framework called KISS, which is Keep It Simple, Stupid, which is like one of the best. I don't even know if it's a product management framework, but if it's not, it should be, right? Because it's like simplification is success, right? If you know how to oversimplify, if you know how to make even someone who doesn't know how it should work can just figure it out because it just feels so easy to do, that you've won. I remember receiving an invoice one time. This invoice was a whole page. It was complete content. And then somewhere in gray down there was the payment link. I literally looked at it, got confused, reached back out and say, where do I pay? And then they say, oh, it's bottom left or bottom right corner. And I'm like,
Mm,
if I have to struggle this much to literally pay you, which is the hardest thing, like you have all that real estate. You could have put a big blue button that says play now. No,
mm,
you put it in a footnote in gray on a white paper.
right. You know what is an easy product to test? A flyer. Build a flyer and ask people what they get from the flyer. And then you start understanding what people like, what people don't like. In software engineering, we're lucky that we have analyst tools that tell us where somebody click and when they stop and how long they stay in our windows. But even a physical product, I was reviewing a flyer for a school today, and the first title had nothing to do what the flyer was going to be about. It was kind of like a tagline, and I was like, well, what's the point of, like, it was the biggest thing in it, and I was like, well, I don't understand why we have that. So just build a flyer. You're talking about how do I get started with product mindset? Put a flyer together and ask people, what do you get from this? And then you start realizing what colors people like, what fonts are important, all of those visuals that attract people, how people feel about it. That's what you need to be curious about, what people feel when you put something in front of them.
Okay, so let's take it to a little bit of beef before we round it up. What's up with Instagram product managers? They're always moving things around. Today, the share button is on the right. Next thing is kind of like in between something.
You
Uh,
know what's my
the
biggest beef?
search button now is down. I'm like, search everywhere is always up. Why is it down?
I tell you what's the product that I have a beef with. LinkedIn. I can't with LinkedIn. Like the video, I was like, literally every time I go to a conference, because I talk in conference, I have to add every single person one by one. Can I not have a feature with I just drop my content to everybody in the conference? They pay for it, they register. Why do I have to go by? But then decided to prioritize a video, so they become a TikTok. It kills me every time. I'm like,
So
LinkedIn, we need to do
when you say
better.
to add someone, what does that? How does that work? How
You
do
know,
you mean?
when you add a person in LinkedIn, when you have a connection in LinkedIn, first of all, the QR code is in the search. So you have
Yeah,
to go to the search. Then there is a little icon that you click, and then it opens a QR code. And most people don't know how
yeah.
to do
Most
that.
people don't know. I found out at a tech event. Most people don't
So,
know that it exists.
oh, LinkedIn. Oh, Dios
And you
mío.
know what's also interesting? Most people also don't know that the camera is there. So when they scan it, they actually use their phone camera, and it's like, no, there's also a camera side by side.
Right, right, right. Then the scan, or you have your code.
Kodo
like
scan.
like LinkedIn, like this is what you do. This is what you do. You connect people in professional settings. Please prioritize the connection of professionals over content creation, please. Every time. That's the beef I have. Because social
Mhm,
media is social media, but if your product is to make me more productive and connect in a professional way, make it
mhm.
easier for me, especially in conference. We all go to conference. It's so hard to get. I can never remember the person I met in what conference. If I could search by event in LinkedIn, you know how much easier my life would be? Simple. Like
And I
ask
know that
me.
that's possible because even iPhones will try to help you classify, like, this is the day you took it, this is the one you took in Rome, this is the one you took in Munich. Just so if you want to kind of like go quickly through your photos and see
Right,
where you took
right,
them.
right. Like metadata that you can capture for me that makes it easy for me to search. But yeah, that's the beef I have.
Well, before we go, one last thing. You co-founded Latinas in Tech Philadelphia. Can you talk me through like why you did that and what's kind of like the mission behind it?
So Latinas in Tech is a nonprofit national, well, actually international nonprofit organization, and the main goal is to help Latinas that are in tech or that are entering tech to thrive. We are a community, and we, at least in Philadelphia, focus on helping Latinas to find jobs, to train, to talk about the everyday corporate. For me specifically, I came to this country, I didn't speak English, I didn't have anybody that went to corporate job, so I didn't know how to go navigate the politics, the ins and outs of it. So it was important for me, and I never had somebody that I could go and talk to about salary negotiation or how to have a presentation. There are so many things that I needed when I was coming into the professional world that many other minorities or Latinos need. And we have the double, I guess, issue that we are female and we are, minorities. So we needed to create a space that was safe for us to support each other, but also help each other advance. So our goal, at least in the Latinas in Tech, is to have people from all of the important companies in the Philadelphia area, Creative Philadelphia, so that if one of the member is laid off, we can say, hey, you have a Latina in Tech in you know Capital One, and maybe they're hiring, and do the same type of support that other communities have traditionally that we don't have. So that was the goal of it. I came to learn about Latinas in Tech because of the New York chapter, which is huge, and they have all of the sponsors of the world, and they do amazing events, and they have a really good connection. And then so I was going to New York for the events, and I was working with them, and then I was like, Philly has to have a couple of Latinas. Now, to become a chapter is a long process. It took us 2 years. You have to have a group. You have to explain the market. It's a product. You have to tell the Latinas in Tech organization why you will be a successful chapter. You have to put a business case together and explain to them, who your target are, how many people you're gonna get, what companies you have. And so we did all of that work, and we launched with the support of the Philadelphia City Hall and the council people, and they have always allow us to go in there and meet. And Comcast is also a big supporter. Pico. So we have a lot of companies that are trying to make sure that the workforce is diverse that we work with, and that's what we are there for.
Wow, that is amazing. That is
It is,
that is a really
it
that
is the
that
best
that is
thing.
really great.
There might, like, I tell you, further than that, like when I go to New York now, I have a place to stay because I go stay in one of the Latinas in Tech House. And when they come, so we go to conference and it's so expensive. And now with the things are going in corporate and all the cuts that are happening, they might pay for your ticket to go to Afrotech, but they might not take for your hotel. So now you have a network of Latinas all over the world. We have Mexico, Spain, we have Canada, we have all of the cities in the US. And then you can always reach out and be like, I'm gonna be there, can I stay? And normally they will connect you to their people. So it has become a support network for us. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we get more people and that we support them, especially nowadays with all of the layoffs that are happening. We wanted to start the year and be like, we're gonna do AI training. And we were like, but we really need to talk about well-being and getting grounded. And what's happening with the Latinos in the US is very emotional for all of us. So we focus now on wellness and how to manage grief and fear. So we do everything that our Latinas in tech need to be good part of the industry and stay, because we do know that Latinos are entering the tech industry at a okay level, but they're not going higher in the ranks, and they're leaving within the first 5 years because they don't feel supported, because the environment is not what they will expect. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we support the journey for people to then start going into VPs, EDs, and becoming executives.
That is such a great mission and objective and great work for you guys
Yeah,
digging in there, taking all that time to even do it. One of the things that I realized doing good is that even doing good is not easy, right? Being mission
it takes
driven, being
time.
focused, it takes work. It's not, you don't snap your fingers and start doing it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, but it's worth it, and you get a lot of reward from it. And in the hard times, which I will say for us, for the Latino community, these are hard times. Having that community has made a world of difference, right? We have a space where we can talk about what's happening at home with our parents or with our relatives, and in my case, my parents don't still have a status, and think about all of the fears that take, even though we're going through the process legally. So being able to talk to somebody that, one, is in corporate, two is an ED and another company, and we have to continue to perform at the level that we were the year prior, but now we are all dealing with all of these fears and all this that makes a difference. Because sometimes I cannot go to work and talk to somebody and be like, oh my god, my mom has a immigration appointment, and they're gonna be like, so let's get to the product, right? So it's has been, we build it for the community, but now it has become something that we ourselves, the leaders of Latinos in Tech, can get support from. So it's really a blessing.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, is that you build it to support other people, but then it starts to support you too. And that's the
For
beauty
sure.
of community.
For sure.
Yeah, I know we're at time, but I've really, really enjoyed this conversation with you and
Thank
all of
you.
the amazing work that you're doing. I know that a lot of people got value from this tonight. As Oluwashitimi said, really good conversation. But that's been the show for tonight. Everyone,
I'm gonna leave you with something, because
yes,
again, my pet peeve is that people are building product without product manager. If you have a product, if you're a startup and you're a technical background of a developer, and you're thinking or building a product, I would recommend that you read the series of Marty Kagan. He's a product manager, Silicon Valley, and he has a lot of good books, Inspire, Empower, that help you understand products and the product mindset. And it will help you become a product manager, even if you don't have the background. Not all of the organizations follow his lead, but I do find that his book will help people, especially in the startup community, really find out if their product is going to be successful and become a actual successful startup. So it's Matty Kagan, and he has Inspire and Power and like five others that I cannot think of.
Yeah, we'll find those and link them. And it's great that you actually brought that back because I did want to ask you a question about a book, but the conversation was so engaging, I completely forgot about it. So thank you for bringing that back. But yeah, that's been the show for tonight. Where can people find you, connect with you, etc.?
So my LinkedIn is probably the easiest. That's why I have so much people with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the easiest. I have my website, which is sandramosquera.com. Instagram at sandramosquera.tech. And yeah, I think those are LinkedIn and Instagram are probably the best. And then we have obviously our Latinas in Tech social media, which is Latinas in Tech Philly, and LinkedIn and Instagram and in TikTok. Even though we don't have a lot of TikToks out there, but yeah, that's a way to connect with Latinas in Tech too.
That is great. So if you're looking for a community and you're in Philly, definitely hit them up. Or Philly and environs. You heard she used
Yes,
to go to New York. So if you're closer to
yeah,
Philly, that
yeah.
might be a spot for
Delaware,
you.
Delaware, New Jersey, all around Philadelphia, we support that community too.
Amazing. Okay, that's been the show for tonight. We'll see you again, not next week, but the week after that for another Working in Tech. This has been episode 85 with Sandra. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.